Well, what's up, students? Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It, where we take topics and conversations that you want to hear about, and we talk about it. Let's get started. Well, welcome, Jeremy, to Let's Talk About It, where we are going to talk about today. Just this casual conversation.
Yeah.
You know, you've been listening to the Kelsey brothers.
I have.
Yes, and so we're the Kelsey brothers.
Yes, we
right
are.
now.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm Jason. I'm
Yes.
older. I'm fatter.
Well,
I have more facial hair.
Well, and I'm up and coming Trav. Sure,
Yeah,
we'll roll with that.
We'll go with it.
So here's the topic today. What does God actually want for us when it comes to growing in a relationship? What does He require? What does He want for us? Because I think that students, man, really kind of can sometimes overcomplicate.
Yeah. I was going to say, I think it's easier to understand, yet harder to do than most of us really know.
Right. Is it because you think that we see church or society or kind of begin to speak a message about how you should be? We listen to so many podcasts and people have all these great things to say. What do you think that the overcomplicatedness comes from?
So I think there's something in all of us, and I'm a dad of teenagers, unconditional love is such a foreign thing.
Yeah.
I mean, most of us don't have many relationships that are truly unconditional love. When we talk about God's grace, for me, I want everyone that I come in contact to know that God's grace means unmerited favor. God is so for us.
Yeah.
Every false religion in the world is about what we as people can do for God. True biblical Jesus following Christianity is, as far as I know, is the only faith that is what God did for us.
Yeah. That's true.
And then it's our response is He desires His love.
Yeah.
You ask the question, I can just say it like this, what God wants from us is to love Him.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, and that's
done?
That's
turn the cameras off. That's it.
Well, wait, hold on. We got a conversation to have.
Come on.
So it's really this relationship.
Yeah.
That we're talking about, a relationship with God.
Yeah.
And it's time spent with.
Yeah.
It's how we grew in our relationship.
Yeah.
You know.
And it's time. It's that intentionality.
Yeah.
And there's such a tension that we have to manage.
Yeah.
Because we do need to make time for the relationship with God. But the act of making time is not the important part.
Right.
It's just a means. And so you and I were having this conversation yesterday, how that looks for me might be totally different than you. And you remember when you and I first started working together?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I got no problem. You were a lot more hey, I need to know the steps.
Right.
And and I remember I would laugh and not hand you a tangible
step.
No,
you wouldn't hand me a tangible step, but this is what you did. I watched you do this for the better part of 6 months until it finally went click in my head. Yeah. Do you remember what you did? I'm going to tell you what you did. Yeah. You'd walk into the office and you would open your journal and you would just say, "Hey, Tashawn, man, can I just share with you what God is teaching me?" And literally, it was this soap. Mm-hmm. And you're like, "Yeah, I've been doing this for 6 years." I'm like, "Bro, okay. Give me the 10-step process for how this started." You're like, "Bro, the next day, hey, dude, let me just share with you what God's teaching me." I had this soap. And I think that oftentimes, especially, I've been in my faith for a while, but I think even me can sometimes get caught up as a young adult trying to aspire to all these things that I see people doing, all these checklists where you walked in for 6 months, there was no judgment, there was no "Hey, Tashawn, you have to." It was just let me share with you what God is. And there was this genuineness and this growth that was tangible. Till one day I was like, I asked you actually, "Hey, what?" Or no, actually, you just came in and shared what God had taught you. And then I was like, "Hey, can I share?"
I remember that. And you were so so excited.
Yeah. Man. It took me 6 months, know.
But I mean, if you think about Jesus' followers, none of them were perfect.
Yeah.
None of them got it right. I mean, even on the day he was killed, Peter's like, I'll die for you. And Jesus is like, you're going to deny me 3 times.
Right.
And then obviously Jesus was right. And Jesus still loved him totally.
Yeah.
Like when you look at this, and I know you've heard me say it, like, I think like some of my favorite words of Jesus are, he comes back, he appears, and man, his followers have screwed up, they've messed up, and this is such an awesome opportunity for teaching.
Right.
And he says, do you have any food? I love that.
Right.
But it's that, like, I mean, think about it. Like, you and I love eating lunch together. Right. We love, like, Jesus was more concerned about this relationship. He trusted, because of his spirit, that his followers were going to become who he created them to be. And so in that moment, the relationship component was so important. I'll tell you, like, in 2019, I was in China. Far western China, and I was at this Buddhist temple, and I'm watching these Tibetan people walk around this temple, and every time they walked around the temple, I'm watching them make a tick mark with stone. And I'm sitting there looking, and I'm kind of watching, and it's caught my attention, and it's I mean, it takes probably a minute for them to walk the full length around this temple. And on this one rock, there's probably 40 tick marks.
Okay.
And I asked the missionary, and he goes, the monks have prescribed them a certain number of walks because of something bad that they've done, something bad that they've said. Yeah. So basically a monk has said, hey, you owe God 50 laps around this. And I remember it like breaking my heart when I realized it. Yeah. But how much do you and I fall into that same trap where all of a sudden we think like, oh man, I've screwed up. I need to do something for God. Right. And it's the trappings, like I said, of our sinfulness of all fallen religions. We all feel like there's this thing we have to do for God.
Right. I love that, Jay, because I think it goes in alignment with something that you said to start off this show, which was that Christianity being the only religion where God has come to man. Yeah. And I think about what you just said, hey, trying to like clean ourselves up in order to have a relationship with God. I think about Paul, who's out killing Christians. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Who knows about God, head knowledge, but hasn't had really the relationship with him. Yeah. And the way that this relationship is started, road to Damascus, blinded by the Son of God. And it changed his life.
Yeah, and absolutely. And there's also a thing, and especially for like the fusion students that are watching this, there's also a thing there you have to see is there's like one sentence in that story encapsulates Paul spending 3 years in the desert. Yeah. And in my opinion, based upon my study, in that time, what Paul was doing was learning a lot of what we're talking about. He's learning, like, what does it look like to be with God in this? Yeah. It wasn't, hey, place your faith, let's go, let's run. It was like, hey, place your faith, like, grow in your relationship with God. Learn more about who he is. Learn how to be with him in his work. Yeah. Then start living it. And then Paul, even all of those years of his ministry later, still realized he was still broken and sinful, but he totally knew that God's grace covered all of his screw-ups.
That's so good. And that he had come to learn that through relationship. Yep. And so that is just one of the things that, man, is really awesome. I think students need to grab a hold of this truth and really apply it. So, Jay, what is one thing that you do to grow in your relationship with Christ?
Yeah, and it's the same thing that you saw me do for, I think I'm in year 8. Yes. I got journals. It is literally every day. Yeah. I start with my prayer is, sometimes deep and meaningful, and sometimes it is as simple as, hey, God, will you speak to me today? Yeah. And then I read the Bible. Like when people tell me like, oh, I don't hear from God, the first question I'm like, do you read the Bible? Right. Like, he wants to talk to you. Right. And I realize the Bible can be overwhelming, not only for students, but for a lot of people. But man, to me, it's a daily commitment. Not that I have to, but that I want to. You and I have a great relationship because we intentionally talk. We intentionally spend some time together. My life is so busy that if I don't go, I'm going to intentionally hear from God every day, I won't.
Right. That's just true. And same with our relationship. If we stop talking.
Yeah. If we stopped talking in 2
Right.
months, we'd be way less friends.
Right.
In 6 months, you might get
Right,
like a
yeah, you
nod
get the
from
head
me.
nod, and it's just
and this is another thing I bet Fusion students have experienced. Like when you're an elementary school student, your friends are the people closest to you. I can tell you the names of all the kids I grew up with on my street, and they were my best friends in the world.
Right.
And then as soon as you start getting the opportunity to move in your social sphere, all of a sudden your friend groups change.
Yeah.
I mean, I was even thinking about some of the people I've worked with here at Abundant Life.
Yeah.
Some of the people I worked with in the past that were really great friends during that time of proximity. And it's not that I don't care about them now, but when you remove that proximity, the friendship aspect goes away. I shot a text to a buddy of mine that moved to Florida, and it was kind of one of those things like when he first moved, I'm like, oh, I'm totally,
we're gonna
like,
keep up.
nothing will change. It's totally changed.
Right.
And so that same thing can happen with God.
Yeah.
And the beauty is like he's always there.
Right.
He
meets
always
us in that
ready
moment.
in a moment.
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm hyper, I'm crazy, I'm busy.
Yes.
And so I've built my life around starting my day with God.
Yeah.
And that started when my kids were really young.
Yeah.
Because it was the only time in my life that was quiet.
Yeah.
And so I've just built onto that habit. And it is the one, like, I don't do a lot of other structured, disciplined things with my faith life because I have such a foundation of that time with God.
Right.
And I do have community of people to talk about, like you and I did every day in the office. Hey, dude, look what God's teaching me. Like,
and there was so much growth there. I know that, you use the SOAP method, and it's still a method you've used 8 years later. And man, thank you so much for just your dedication, but also, you never approached me with that, with a point of like shame or like, hey, I can't believe. It was just like, this is what I want for you. It's blessed my life, but let me show you by way of literally just communicating it rather than like, hey, like come and do this. And as a result, man, it's really blessed my life. So thank you so much. And thanks I asked you to come on here this fast because this is really to me this is what's great about this show is that I just want to see people who are living this thing out, have real conversations. We don't have a script.
Nope.
There's no script. Nope. This is literally just relationship here that we get
and it's kind of a picture too of what we desire for the students. Like you and I have such a relationship that we can walk over and Shelby and Carter can throw 3 cameras and a whole bunch of lights and these microphones and we can just talk because I mean, if you think about it, this is kind of like the conversation we had walking around outside. Like this is what we do.
This is what we do.
And it's like, so like I tell people when we talk about like building that like kind of daily relationship with God, I do all of our leadership training through Ally, and I tell all of our leaders like, hey, that's the most important foundation to build upon, but it doesn't have to be complex. But man, if it's not, it's so missing.
Yeah, that's good. So there you have it, students. Woo. Thank you so much for tuning in today on today's episode of Let's Talk About It. What does God really want for you? It's relationship. Boom. Love you. See you soon.